Hello good people, so this is my new microATX motherboard. Why don't microATX cases and systems get much love? Well, that changes today. I'm coming for you, my friends. 1 and 2. You're so light. Alright, so this is the first one. Number 2. Get back in there, you sneaky little rubber piece trying to escape the dust filter. What's this? This fell out? You know, I really don't want to peel this right now because it is all acrylic on the exterior, so it'll just be covered in smudges and finger marks in the end. But of course, I gotta deliver the peel, the satisfying peel. But I am sorry if you're not into that. Wow, so this is a little detail, but I appreciate it. The plastic film on the side panel is in 3 sections. So you remove them from the place where you can access the thumb screws, but then the actual main portion, that's the film here. So you can remove it after reinstalling the side panel so that the entire thing is not covered with finger marks. Only these sections where you're actually going to be handling the side panel. Well done. So these cases are very much budget oriented, which is why I have this super basic Z370 motherboard from Gigabyte. I think this one sells for $100, and normally microATX hardware is a lot more expensive. So I'm finally excited to see what type of budget-oriented microATX systems we can acquire moving forward. So the Q300L sells for $40, it's nice and affordable, while the Q300p is the slightly more fancy one because of those rubber handles on the 4 corners and the blackout exterior acrylic paneling. And so if you are on the budget and potentially have some size constraints within your space, is it actually worth it considering this whole microATX direction? Let's discuss right after this. Damn it, laundry machine. It's always a pleasure upgrading or adding new hardware to your system, especially when it comes to storage, like this new ZTR200 drive from Toshiba. It's a great value SSD, offers a nice boost in performance for boot times, file transfers, and just general system and work operation with cutting-edge 3D flash memory and ultra-reliable controller with built-in power management. Consider the upgrade today with TR200. It's available in different capacities. Check it out below. Alright, so these MasterBox cases have an identical core frame and they look different because the Q300L is the bare bones version with no paneling on the exterior, while the Q300p has this super good looking character with handles and this fake TG impersonation. The build quality on both is actually pretty good, and the only way to tell it's a cheap frame is by looking at the non-reusable PCI slots. I mean, come on, coolermaster, what is this? Now, it is really interesting to see how this dust filter design on the Q300L really elevates the chassis from this plain boring frame into something that actually looks good. It's cheap, it's functional, as both the front and top are covered with this dust filter, which reveals the perforation that in many ways is an exciting development for case customization, because precisely because of it, we have this entirely different version of the case with the acrylic paneling instead. So this perforation spans all 3 sides, which are equal, so exterior visual options in theory should be plenty. This also complements fan mounting with dual 120mm fans that can be installed along anywhere, as the perforation is spaced out accordingly, while the 140mm fans mount have only the 1 set of holes that are marked for visual aid. Now, the 2 disadvantages of this design is the see-through nature of the perforation when the interior is illuminated, completely hiding the pattern on the dust filter, and secondly, it is of course an airflow barrier. The handles on the fancy model are rubberized and feel great, both to the touch and supporting the weight of the frame during transport. They are removable, and each corner can have this mind of its own for future accessories with this mounting method. It's just a matter of coolermaster actually releasing something cool to complement this modular nature. For example, the only flexible element is the I/O panel that lets you mount it on any of the 3 sides because the frame is square, and so is the side panel. And you can even mount the I/O behind the motherboard tray if for some reason you'd want the acrylic panel there. It's a really cool starting point on how cases can be innovative, because let's face it, it's a really stagnant market right now, and we just need to see a lot more flexibility when it comes to the frame itself. So this flexible I/O mounting is pretty cool, but you have to keep in mind the cables. They exit straight from the center right there. So for example, in its default orientation, you cannot mount a radiator at the front because the cables will interfere. So you gotta maneuver that I/O somewhere else if you want to occupy one of the walls for a radiator. Also, while the bottom bottom IO mount is possible. I had issues getting it installed because the cable exit is kind of a mess and needs to be low profile, and it interferes with my power supply. The rear fan mount is on small rails for a little height adjustment if needed. The thumb screws on the metal side panel for some reason are covered in this thick rubber, which can actually be used as case feet, so if you want to lay the case flat. And I'm sure you've already been thinking it, the acrylic panel is an absolute nightmare if you hate particles. Me and the styrofoam piece had a good time, so if you can force yourself to admire the case from a distance, you'll need to accept the static nature of the exterior. The interior is super bland though, literally nothing on here but a few cutouts for cables. We have a 3.5-inch drive caddy behind the motherboard tray, plus 2 mounting locations for SSDs, so this $40 price point is justifiable, plus there is an exhaust fan at the back. Wait a second, if this case comes with 2 additional front fans aside from the rear one, like on the cheaper version, how does the front get any air? I can see the fans and they're basically just flush against this panel. There's nothing here. The only opening is at the bottom. Right here. What? Have they not learned from the H500p? I mean, great, there are RGB fans for additional prettiness, but come on. This needs to be a mesh. So I've removed the panel and you guys can see that's the fan and that is the front panel. So there's literally maybe, I don't know, 5 millimeters of clearance between the panel and the fan. Gonna get so much airflow with this one. They have learned with the mesh addition of cases, so I'm guessing maybe that's in the pipeline, but still quite disappointing. Oh, and we even have a dust filter for the bottom, but it keeps flying out. I'm not sure how this sits there. And so I decided to build inside the 300p because it looks better and comes with an RGB controller, something you need to light those fans, as my motherboard does not have an RGB header. So you can reroute the reset IO cable into the controller to cycle between the colors, although strangely, none of this is listed in the instructions manual. I am very sorry about my lack of cable management job, but there are some cable tie points in here and quite a lot of space. Quite deep space here to tuck all your cables, and the side panel closes just fine without me doing anything with this cable mess. Boom! Alright, so the system is built and my experience was okay. You know, the frame is fine for cable management. You know, I would appreciate like maybe a power supply shroud over here just to cover up this area. You know, for $70 for the more expensive enclosure, rubber grommets would have been appreciated, but they're not present here. But really my main sort of sour point would be the microATX motherboard and our choice of it. So this one's kind of terrible because it's not full-size microATX, it's kind of in between ITX and standard microATX. So the incompatibility with the rear fan and the cooler is kind of an issue. Ah, crap. The fan. It interferes with the damn cooler. Plus the motherboard is shorter, so the cables have to travel longer distance from the cable cutouts. But overall, I mean, this is okay, but I was expecting a little bit more for $70. So for the cheaper frame, the $40 Q300L, which actually has airflow because of dust filters, the frame is identical. So there is no difference in terms of your building assembly. The only difference would be the aesthetics. So here, you know, this is completely blocked. I mean, it looks beautiful. It looks like glass, but of course it's acrylic and lots of issues come with that. The handles are cool, so you can potentially orientate the case the way you want, whereas with this, you can't really. And while I appreciate coolermaster strive to do something risky and innovative like this, because, you know, we haven't really seen accessorizing the exterior of a case on this level before, right now this is only the thing that exists. We don't have any more accessories for exterior paneling. You know, there is no mesh version for the Q300p right now, so there is absolutely no airflow coming in here, which I find ridiculous. So why would you want to spend $70 on something that has no cooling potential? You know, you might as well just go for the $40 version that has proper airflow, but of course it doesn't look as fancy or glamorous as this guy. And aside from this hilarious front panel that is here for visuals only, it literally has no airflow. I cannot feel anything coming from the back. I was going to commend coolermaster for including different fans on their cases that I thought, hey, this is great. But these fans, they're terrible. Absolutely terrible. Loud, first of all. It doesn't matter how much air they push though, because there's nothing coming in here anyway. Now I do want to bring out the size argument for microATX systems. Smaller motherboards, smaller cases altogether. Generally, but not in this case. For the Q300L, maybe, but not for the Q300p. It's about the same height as this 275R mid-tower from Corsair that can fit an ATX motherboard, a 360 cooler. So I'm not sure if Coolermaster is doing this right in terms of bulking up the exterior to be almost as big as some other mid-towers that are very common in this form factor. I really do love their sort of that bare bones basic approach with the Q300L. Dust filters everywhere, proper airflow, and it's only $40. So for budget build in which a micro-ATX system makes sense, the Q300L makes sense also. And so my worry here is not Coolermaster avoiding risk, because they've clearly shown that they're not afraid to do something different, but it's Coolermaster's persistence in making sure that there are plenty of accessories that are actually also affordable, because you're not gonna buy a $40 case to only spend $40-$60 more on paneling and accessories for it, because that doesn't really make sense. And I feel like more people are asking for this whole micro-ATX bubble to expand, and this is clearly happening right now, but maybe there should be focus on compact cases, which makes sense for a micro-ATX motherboard, and not something that already almost approaches the size of a standard mid-tower. Join the wireless club with Corsair's new Dark Core mouse. Play the way you want with 9 programmable buttons aligned in a comfortable shape, a fantastic sensor you can trust, and crazy good wireless performance, plus Qi wireless charging built in. Focus on the game, the Dark Core will do the rest. I feel like Coolermaster's really just poked a little tiny hole in the entire potential of this direction, customizing the exterior panels because of this sort of perforation that allows other things to be mounted anywhere on the chassis, which is super cool as a concept, but its implementation currently is very much in the infancy stages. And so I'll be avoiding micro-ATX for now. It's just not for me, it seems, but I do appreciate their courage to move in with something like this, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think about micro-ATX systems and hardware and cases in general, so let me know in the comments below. I'm Dmitry, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Oh, and Coolermaster, maybe a mesh version would be nice. And maybe some better fans too. Oh, and the power supply shroud.